My mom married a younger guy and wanted him to walk me down the aisle instead of my dad. When I said no, she skipped my wedding. Hello, everyone. So, I had a terrible disagreement with my mom a few days ago on the day of my wedding, or rather, after everything was done. It was entirely her fault, but I recently spoke with my grandmother and unwittingly made matters worse for her. That is why I have begun to question whether what I did was justified or not. I'm 24F and have been with my partner, 24M, for the past 10 years. We began dating in high school, and he is the love of my life, so this wedding was a big event for me. We got engaged last year and spent months trying to make it an experience that everyone would remember. He and I had saved a lot of money to pay for it, but my mother was unconcerned. My parents split when I was 6 years old, and they have been co-parenting me ever since. They never got along, and I honestly don't know how they managed to stay married for so long. They were married for about 3 years before I was born and were together for another 6 years before splitting up. Most children are upset when their parents tell them they are getting divorced, but when they explained it to me, I was ecstatic. For me, it meant they wouldn't have to fight every day, and if they were happy, I might finally have a chance to be happy as well. As a child, I was satisfied with their decision, and they shared custody of me. I'd spend half the month at my father's house and the other half at my mother's. Unfortunately, I rejoiced too soon. I didn't understand that even in a co-parenting arrangement, they'd have to communicate with each other and reach an agreement on issues concerning me. They struggled even with that. They were continually bad-mouthing each other in front of me, making me feel caught in the crossfire. Both believed the other was out to make things tough for them. I tried to be understanding as a child, but by middle school, I'd had enough. While staying with my father, he got into a disagreement with my mother because she wanted to rearrange the schedule to accommodate an event, which he did not agree with. I began to feel like a burden for both of them. That night, I packed a few belongings and went away. I was just 12. I walked to the bus stop, but because there was a scary person there, I retreated to a park near my house and decided to go to the bus station in the morning. Fortunately, I fell asleep in the park and nothing happened to me. By daybreak, my father had realized I was missing and called the cops. I was taken home safely. When my parents realized I had run away, they confronted me about my situation. I told them they made me feel like a burden since they were constantly arguing over me. That's when they agreed to be better to one another for my sake. They had no idea I'd take such drastic measures in response to their behavior. After that, my father stuck to his word. Even when he argued with my mother, he didn't tell me about it, so I didn't feel bad. My mother, on the other hand, would periodically forget and yell at me about my father. It made things difficult because I genuinely loved both of my parents. Neither were villains. They simply couldn't get along, making parenting difficult for them. It's difficult to raise a child when you dislike each other, but my father made an effort. My mother, on the other hand, did not take her vow very seriously. Eventually, I became closer to my father instead. I would spend time with her when I visited her on her turn to have me, and we would have a good time together, so I didn't love her any less, but I felt closer to my father. After I grew up and departed for college, my father kept in touch with me more than my mother. So right now, I would certainly say that I favor my father over my mother. However, I have always treated them with equal love and respect. What happened recently was simply too entitled for me to handle, so I ended up lashing out at her. My parents dated other individuals following their divorce, and my father decided to marry again around 4 years ago. He had been dating my stepmother for over 3 years by that point, and their relationship was serious, so it made sense for him to marry again. Prior to that, he had only had a couple of relationships that went nowhere. My mother, however, took a slightly different approach. She would only have flings after the divorce and would not commit to anyone, even if the other guy was interested. I'm not judging her. That's her decision, and I respect it. But then she contacted me unexpectedly around 6 months ago and informed me she had been seeing a guy for a few months, and the two of them had decided to marry. She wanted me to be present for the wedding. I had no idea what was going on because everything happened so quickly and unexpectedly, but she told me she was confident in this person, and he appeared to be confident in her as well. She had a good time for many years, but now she wished someone would be there for her. Her husband, Ethan false name, had just been with my mother for 4 months when they married, and they appeared to be in love, but I was apprehensive about their bond. For starters, he was about a decade younger than her. Furthermore, they had only known each other for a short period of time. Ethan had proposed they marry, and my mother had mentioned it often at the ceremony. But I don't think she realized that wasn't the situation she expected because it only made things appear more suspicious. I tried to talk to her about it, but she dismissed me and said she was certain of her decision. So I didn't explore it further since I didn't want to come out as judgmental. For what it's worth, he seemed to be into her. So, I went to the wedding along with a handful of her close friends and relatives. I even wished them the best. When I informed my father about all of this, he was surprised that she had married someone she had only known for a few months, but by then, it had already been completed. After that, I was too preoccupied with preparing my own wedding to worry about what was going on with my mother and Ethan, who appeared content enough. They've been married for 6 months, and I haven't seen her much because she spends all of her time traveling with him. She didn't even come to my bridal shower, but I had no complaints. However, the night before my wedding, while we were all at the hotel, she knocked on my door and informed me that she had something extremely important to talk about with me, so I allowed her inside. That's when she decided to inform me that she overheard me talking to my father about walking me down the aisle, and she assumed I'd asked Ethan to do it. At the rehearsal supper, she expected me to ask Ethan, but I didn't. Even though I had previously asked her, I decided to have both of my parents follow me down the aisle since I felt it would be more appropriate for my family dynamics. I did not want my mother to feel left out. I had no idea why she was even bringing up Ethan. I was shocked that she would think such a thing. I'd only known Ethan for a few months, and as long as my father was alive, I wasn't going to let any random person accompany me down the aisle on my wedding day. To me, Ethan was simply my mother's husband, not my stepfather. I made it quite clear to her. I informed her that I had no intention of asking Ethan at any time, and if she thought I would, she was mistaken. I'd never mentioned or hinted at anything like that, so I had no idea why she suddenly believed it. It was just ridiculous. To make matters worse, when she realized I was serious and that my biological father would be walking me down the aisle instead of her husband, she threw a fit in my room. She stated that if this were the case, she and Ethan would not attend the wedding. Apparently, she had assumed that I was closer to her and, therefore, Ethan would be the one to walk me down the aisle. She felt that if both she and my father accompanied me down the aisle, it would convey the incorrect message and make Ethan feel insecure. She kept having her tantrums, but I didn't have time for them, especially the night before my wedding when I needed to sleep. So, I ended it by informing her that if she didn't want to attend the wedding, she could leave with Ethan. Then I requested her to leave my room so that I could sleep. When I awoke the next morning, my mother was not there. I told everyone close to me about what happened the night before, including my immediate family, spouse, and bridesmaids. I knew I'd be busy for the rest of the day, so there was no time to ponder about her. Looking back, I'm grateful for it because it would have probably ruined my mood. My father and stepmother eventually walked me down the aisle, and a few people exchanged puzzled looks, but no one said anything because it was clear I wanted it to be a happy day without any issues. I like my stepmother, so I didn't mind when she walked me down the aisle, and the wedding went well. But 1 hour before the celebrations were to conclude, my mother arrived at the reception with Ethan, and she had a really embarrassed expression on her face, so I knew she was there to apologize. I had been drinking, and I was overjoyed from just getting married, so I didn't mind her returning for the reception and was more than willing to forgive her. I accepted her apology and told her she may join everyone else. Instead, she stayed by our side and explained that she had a favor to ask. She asked us to rework the wedding ceremony so she could be a part of it as well. My husband and I were both stunned by the absurdity of the request, and we instantly refused. But then she began pleading with us, and even Ethan was concerned. He said that she needed us to do this as a favor because otherwise, my grandmother would cut her off. Both of my father's parents attended the wedding, but my grandmother, my mother's only surviving parent, was unable to attend due to her out-of-state residence and medical concerns that prevented her from traveling. I promised my grandmother I'd send her a video of the wedding. While my mother and Ethan were driving home, my grandmother video called my mother to chat with me. That's when my mother realized she had made a mistake, and she was now worried about what her mother would think about her actions during my wedding. That's why she asked me to recreate the ceremony so she could be a part of it, and my grandmother wouldn't find out what occurred. My mother honestly thought it was a reasonable answer because the venue was still paid for, the decorations were up, and the majority of the guests hadn't left yet. But I held firm and informed my mother that she chose to leave the previous night, and it was her fault. I was not going to restart my wedding only to correct her mistake. She began arguing, insisting that we do things her way so that her mother would not cut her off. My grandmother loves family relationships, and the only reason she couldn't go was health. If she found out my mother had done anything so dumb, she would not hesitate to cut her off because I am her only grandchild, and she cherishes me. Everyone knew she would be devastated if she found out what my mother had done. That's why my mother was so determined to resolve the matter before my grandmother found out. I wasn't in the mood for a battle with my mother, and my grandmother kept attempting to video call her. So, I phoned my maid of honor, took my phone from her, and before my mother could say or do anything, I FaceTimed my grandmother to tell her the truth. I had had enough of my mother's complaining. My grandmother was delighted to see me, and after a brief discussion about the wedding, I got right to the issue. I told her exactly what had happened to my mother and how she wanted me to restart the wedding especially for her. I did all of this in front of my mother, who was frozen in place. When I turned the phone around so my grandmother could face her, my mother said nothing. My grandmother raged at her for a full 6 minutes, expressing her disappointment. She informed my mother that she did not need to return home for the holidays and did not want to speak with her until I had forgiven her. Only then would she contemplate making amends with my mother again. After my grandmother hung up, my mother and Ethan remained there, speechless. I expected them to have an outburst, but they didn't. They simply went after a few minutes without saying anything, which was ideal because throwing a tantrum would have wrecked the rest of the reception. We decided not to talk about my mother or Ethan for the remainder of the evening so that they would not ruin it for us. My grandmother called the day after the wedding, after we had returned home, to discuss all that had happened. My mother kept playing the same card, claiming that her parents thought my father was the right guy for her, but marrying him proved to be the worst mistake of her life. She felt my grandmother was unwilling to give Ethan a fair chance because they hadn't been together long. My grandmother believed she had given him a fair chance, emphasizing that her problems were with the hasty nature of the marriage, not Ethan as a person. However, Ethan took it personally and continued his attitude, resulting in increased tension. Things had been strained between my mother and grandmother for months, and a recent FaceTime call on the day of my wedding was the final straw for my grandmother. She couldn't believe my mother skipped my wedding simply because I refused to let Ethan walk me down the aisle. We had no idea whether Ethan or my mother had come up with this idea, but it made no difference. My mother chose to miss my wedding, then pretended it never happened and wanted me to recreate everything so my grandmother would not find out. After discussing it, my grandmother and I understood that my mother had taken both of us for granted. We resolved not to speak with her for a few months until we were ready to forgive her or she really apologized. My grandmother wrote a message to my mother on our behalf, asking her not to contact us until we were ready to communicate and hoping she would respect that. I thought this was a decent answer, but my mother began blaming me for everything. She wrote me nasty messages last night, claiming that it was my fault that her own mother was not speaking to her. She remarked that if I didn't want to redo the wedding, I could have simply said so, which I did several times. She accused me of intentionally escalating the situation by involving my grandmother. She felt that I didn't need to tell my grandmother and give her more reasons to be furious with her. My mother thought I was ganging up on her by recruiting my grandmother, and she thought it was unjust. She did not think I should have dragged my grandmother into our argument. I think she's simply whining, but she could have a point. Is it my fault for bringing my grandmother into this conflict with my mother? Update 1. Thank you to everyone who provided positive comments on my post. I've decided to block my mother and end this nonsense. I don't need to put up with her conduct anymore. She's been acting strangely since she started dating Ethan, and I don't need such negativity in my life. My husband and I are heading to Paris for our honeymoon next week, and I want to enjoy ourselves without worrying about my mother. Blocking her means that I don't hear from her throughout this period. I've always tried to treat Mom with the same love and respect that I've shown my father, but after all of this, I no longer feel bound to do so. My father has always treated me better, so I don't think it's wrong to stop treating her equally. I discussed everything with my grandmother, father, and husband, and they all believe that blocking her is the right decision. Most of them say I should have blocked her a long time ago, perhaps on the day of the wedding itself, but I delayed because it was difficult for me to let go of the idea of having a nice relationship with my mother. It now has to be done. I can't let her treat me this way and get away with it. And I'm going to make sure I put my foot down now. Update 2. Hello everyone. Well, My hubby and I are departing for our honeymoon tomorrow. I must have told my mother at some point, as she appeared to remember. I'm not sure how I feel about what just happened, but I'm going to post it here because I feel compelled to keep you all informed. In my previous update, I noted that I had blocked my mother everywhere, so she sent an email to my work email address, which I had not blocked. I didn't expect her to contact me there, so I was thrown off guard. I had intended to delete the email, but curiosity got the better of me, and I ended up reading it with my husband. We both felt strange at the end because my mother expressed her love for me and apologized for her recent actions in the email. She explained that the only reason she wanted Ethan to lead me down the aisle was because he insisted. She claimed it was not her idea and even attempted to postpone the wedding for a few months to get to know him better. Ethan put pressure on her, and the night before the wedding, he twisted her into believing that if my father walked me down the aisle instead of him, people would misinterpret it. She supported him throughout the email because she loved him, but she also expressed regret over everything. She felt torn between Ethan and her family, and she could now relate to how I felt as a child of divorce. She acknowledged Ethan's tendency to be controlling, but she didn't mind it. After chatting for a few days, they both agreed that his domineering nature had caused problems in the family. He committed to work on it, and she pledged to stand up for herself rather than be a doormat. She closed the email by wishing us well and expressing her desire to reconnect once we return from our honeymoon. What worries me isn't the apology. It's that Ethan might not be the right guy for my mother. Although she stated that they will work on it, the way she characterized Ethan gave me the impression that something was wrong and that she was covering for him. My husband and I are going tomorrow, so we cannot deal with this right now. We decided to let her handle the situation. I notified my father, who, regardless of his feelings for my mother, would never harm her since he is a wonderful person. I also told one of her closest friends, whom she has known since childhood. I'm convinced she would not gossip. With her friend and my father informed, I feel certain that my mother will be cared for and that I will be able to enjoy a worry-free honeymoon. Update 3. Hello. This is going to be a brief update. I last posted an update around 4 months ago, just before leaving for my honeymoon. We intended to deal with whatever was going on with my mother and Ethan when we returned, but when I emailed my mother following our return, I never received a response. Her friends informed me she appeared to be happy, so I figured everything was okay and moved on with my work. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, and I heard from my mom again. She thanked me for telling her friend about my concerns about Ethan, especially because she lacked the guts to express them herself. It turns out I was correct. Ethan was not the right guy for her. He had tried to isolate her from everyone, even urging her to cut ties with a childhood acquaintance after she repeatedly canceled plans with her friend. Her friend confronted her, and my mother eventually broke down and told everything. Ethan had been treating her horribly, and she couldn't take it any longer. She filed for divorce with the help of her friend and has been living with them ever since. My mother thanked me for looking out for her and informing her friend about my concerns. Without that, she doubted anyone would have noticed what was going on. I'm pleased she's getting out of that situation, and I hope we can all assist her move forward. Even my grandmother was surprised, but we're all doing our best to support my mother. We simply hope that things improve from here.